Back in the beginning of 2023, Universal released M3GAN, a horror film that overperformed for the genre, especially relative to its budget. A hit with audiences and critics alike, a franchise was born and a sequel was a no-brainer. Fast forward to the summer of 2025 though, that sequel flopped, and the would-be franchise ended with it, because the usually forgiving horror audience walked away. Why they did, we're about to see in this Postmortem, as we ask the question, what went wrong? This video is sponsored by Incogni. When M3GAN first came out in 2023, it appeared to have taken a cue from the 2019 Child's Play remake. A remake which introduced AI to the slasher franchise in a fashion which was frankly wasted on a remake, as it would have been far better served in an original property, and that's what M3GAN did. M3GAN opened to 30 million domestically and ended up grossing 180 million worldwide, which is hardly Marvel and Tom Cruise numbers, but considering that it only cost 12 million to make, that still made it a monster hit relative to its budget, and something that should have guaranteed a whole host of sequels for years and years to come. Because with numbers and a reception like that, M3GAN could and should have been up there with Chucky, Freddy and Jason. But that's should have been in the past never tense, because it's not going to happen now, not after the sequel utterly tanked at the box office, having lost 2/3 of the opening weekend audience since the first movie. That only happens when something has gone very, very wrong, and we're about to see what. But before we get to that, and on the topic of AI, have you ever gotten random calls and texts with offers you never asked for all hours of the day? If so, that would be because data brokers have gotten a hold of your personal data and they're selling it to the highest bidder, and all you get out of that is annoyance because you are the unwitting product. In the US in particular, your data may end up in public search sites, and health insurance companies are known to use some of that data as determinants of health, meaning your documented online activity may actually increase your rates. There are hundreds of such data brokers, but the good news is that Incogni, this video sponsor, keeps track of them, and they will protect your privacy by demanding these data brokers remove anything they have on you, plow through any objections as they come, and send repeat removal requests in case they should get a hold of your data again. The whole process is automated, so all you have to do is create an account, grant Incogni the right to work on your behalf, and kick back and relax while they do the work for you, keeping you up to date every step of the way. Since this video is sponsored by Incogni, we naturally have a deal for you. Use our code MIDNIGHT at the link in the description, and you'll get 60% off an annual Incogni plan. So head down to the description and get your data protected now. With that, let's see where M3GAN went so disastrously wrong. Before we get to why the sequel failed, let's take another look at the original. The secret behind the original M3GAN's success was that it was a horror movie, more specifically a slasher movie with an AI twist that the horror audience showed up for, as well as quite a few in the general audience, many of whom only showed up because they were dragged along by friends and family in the built-in horror audience, no doubt. That cannot be stressed enough. The viral campaign that was everywhere obviously helped, but key here is that the already built-in horror audience showed up and spread hype and positive word of mouth, which brought in members of the general audience as well. Meaning the audience that is most inclined to return for more M3GAN is first and foremost the built-in horror audience. They are the ones who are passionate about M3GAN, not the casuals in the more mainstream audience. They only showed up because their horror hound friends recommended it so passionately. Hence, the obvious decision for the studio here would be to make the sequel another slasher, and trust that the horror audience would return and bring even more friends from the mainstream audience this time around. A smaller ask this time, since the first movie already is a hit. Alas, the studio instead decided, what if we just ditch the horror hounds that made the first movie a hit, and instead aim this one at the mainstream audience directly? How about we give this the Terminator 2 treatment? How about we ramp up the budget and the action spectacle, open it in the summer blockbuster season, and then turn the killer doll of the first movie into something of an action hero, and then we make it all pink like Barbie and girl-bossy at that? What could go wrong? That's what they did, and clearly it all went wrong. From Terminator 1 to Terminator 2, that franchise changed genre. To be clear, the original Terminator was never a pure horror movie, as it had pervasive sci-fi elements as well as action and explosions. Yet, in many ways, it followed a horror formula, more specifically the slasher formula, with the would-be final girl on the run from a virtually unstoppable boogeyman, one who can't be bargained with or reasoned with, as killing is all he does, just like Jason, Michael, and that crew. For the sequel though, the boogeyman was now made the hero, out to save all of humanity from the evil forces of AI, kind of like what we just saw in M3GAN 2. Only M3GAN 2 bombed, while Terminator 2 was a smash hit, one of the biggest movies of all time at the time of its release, as well as the most expensive. So why did that work for Terminator? Well, first and foremost, it was made by a master filmmaker in James Cameron, who already had successfully shifted franchise gears for both Rambo and Alien. And secondly, and even more importantly, the more heroic role of the Terminator in the sequel echoed the public persona of Arnold Schwarzenegger at the time. You see, by the time of the sequel, Arnold was the greatest action hero there ever was, at the height of his fame. By then, him saving the day was his brand, so him doing that for his return to the Terminator was on brand, so much so that the studio was so scared the audience might legit think that Arnold was the bad guy and be put off by that. That the twist that he really was the good guy, which was hidden in the iconic teaser and first trailer, was deliberately spoiled for the audience far in advance of the movie's release. Reaction channels may be blown away by that deliberate twist today, but no one went into Terminator 2 when it came out in the summer of 1991 expecting Arnold to be anything other than the hero. All of which is to say, the change of direction and genre for Terminator was fully organic, and one which was fully supported and even expected by the audience. Not so with M3GAN. Maybe in time they could have done a genre switch on M3GAN, but this wasn't the time. The image of M3GAN does not have anywhere near the mass recognizability required that they can turn her into a hero, at least not yet. We've seen such switches happen before. Even Freddy Krueger went from being a scary killer of children to being a smash hit with children. But achieving that took quite a few movies, a spin-off TV series, and lest we forget, tons and tons of merchandise released over multiple years as the brand expanded. And even then, it should be stressed that Freddy never pulled a Terminator 2 and helped the Dream Warriors against a larger foe. Now, the puppets in Puppet Master have switched from bad to good, but again, not the second time out. Who knows, if the story in M3GAN 2 had been in M3GAN Part 6 instead of in 2, it might have worked. I mean, Part 6 is where Jason Voorhees fully and undeniably became a zombie in the Friday the 13th franchise. But Part 2 was clearly too soon for such a switch in M3GAN. After all, up until this last weekend, there was only one M3GAN movie, and it was released a mere 2 years ago. At this point in time, M3GAN's built-in audience remains the horror audience that made the first movie a hit. No one else could be counted on to show up, which clearly they didn't. So what really went wrong here? The producers and filmmakers got impatient. That's what went wrong in a nutshell. They wanted a whole cinematic universe in which M3GAN is the hero, and they wanted it now. And they were clearly in a rush, for the spin-off Soulmate, which takes place in the same continuity, is already in the can and 6 months away from release. And who knows how that is going to work out now. In their rush to turn the villain from the first movie into the hero, and obviously an icon to boot, as then M3GAN merchandise would bring in so much sweet third-party licensee cash. They forgot that that kind of commercial appeal and recognizability takes time, and you can't rush it by adding in a ton of pink and girlbossing it. In an era where the audience has completely and utterly rejected girlbosses in all their forms. And outside of Barbie, pink doesn't sell all that well either. And speaking of colors, huge corporations all over the West have found out that rainbows and going all in on pride generally isn't expanding their business either. On the contrary, many who tried that came to learn that more often than not, that resulted in sales and earnings contracting. Yet the people behind M3GAN 2 thought they could buck the trend, which clearly they couldn't. The irony here is that if only they had released a few more slasher movies like the first, in which M3GAN was the villain and boogeyman, or in this case, boogie girl, then they just might have gotten everything they wanted, with time. If only they could have waited until it happened organically, M3GAN could have been made every bit as marketable as Freddy Krueger was at his most commercial down the line. And who knows, she could even have been accepted as a girl boss. But alas, they couldn't wait, and went there before there was any demand for it. So now, M3GAN's own built-in horror audience have rejected her. And without them paving the way, who else is going to give her a chance? Horror fans are a forgiving bunch, as a general thing, but the big question now is, will they have forgiven everything in time for Soulmate? Or is that different enough from M3GAN that it actually can bring an audience all on its own, irrespective of M3GAN? And if so, should the studio scramble to remove any semblance of M3GAN from the movie, if there is any? Because under normal circumstances, the would-be M3GAN franchise would be done already with this opening weekend. Soulmate represents a proverbial stay of execution. We'll see how that goes when Soulmate opens. Be sure to like and share this video and subscribe if you haven't, and we'll keep you up to date as this develops. For now, let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comments. And before you go, remember to protect your data. Use our code MIDNIGHT at the link in the description, and you'll get 60% off an annual Incogni plan.